Hello, writers. I'm so glad you're joining me for another prompt publication video. Today with me is Deborah Trowbridge, and I am very proud of her and her wonderful accomplishments with the Flash Challenge that she did with us in November 2022. Deborah has gone on to do so well with the story she wrote, and we're just here today to talk about it and to hear a bit more about how she writes and what her processes are. So welcome, Deborah.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Awesome. So I'm going to jump straight in. My first question, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself? What do you do? Do you day jobs? What do you do to keep busy? What does your writing day look like?
I taught back east in New York City for close to 30 years, worked with children in and out of the classroom, and have written bits and pieces since I was a kid, and gifted various family members with the odd poem or short story. And jumping forward, my two older granddaughters really were my muses. We used to write stories together, and I would start a sentence, or Kaya would start a sentence, and then I'd pick it up and we'd go back and forth. And of course, we all have stories in us, and it was just a wonderful vehicle. All of that back then.
Lovely.
I was born and raised in Massachusetts. I have a dancing background. I have a theatrical background. And the writing has always been with me. And that's something I really love about where I am in the chapter of my life now. I'm still dancing. I do the ballet. I've taken up flamenco and castanets. But the writing I didn't know until I took the Flash Challenge that I had these stories in me. And we all have stories in us. This has been such a wonderful opportunity for me to structure myself and to go small and then get big and then get daring. And so I'm in a daring process and risk taking, and sometimes it's often messy. But that's a little bit about me.
We enjoy a good mess because there's so much potential in a mess. So good stuff. Um, Tell us a little bit about your stories and about the experience of writing it and the mad rush of the challenge.
Um, well, I came to it at a point in time where I had just lost my life partner in October. And I have
So
a writer
sorry.
friend who, yes, he was just a wonderful human being. He's with me today. I have his watch right here, and
Oh.
my pearls of Bob. And my writer friend Sherry Young in Ireland had been writing a novel. She is writing a novel, and told me how wonderful Mia Botha was in Deadlines for Writers. I had never heard of. So I took a peek and I went, I think this is right up my alley because I do short pieces, and it seems I have a talent for that. And I thought, well, I'd like to put my toes in the proverbial water and see how I do. And I wasn't sure that I was prepared to go public with my stories. And you offered the wonderful option of reading others, but not necessarily commenting and putting the work out there. And after a couple of days, I realized I was enjoying it so much. I thought I'm going to just put my toes in a little deeper, and I exchanged some emails with you. And as a result, I started doing the daily, and I thought reading other people's work for I think a day was perhaps too much for me, and it wasn't at all. And I realized I was suddenly metaphorically, I was some sort of a sponge, and I was experimenting, and I was reading the wonderful Hilary Mantel Wolf Hall books, which was inspiring me. Um, and that's really how I came to the Flash Challenge of last November. And I got wonderful feedback from the community of other writers, and made a couple of writerly friends. Um, One is in Australia. She's brilliant. Alyssa and Sherry and I have become friends and keep in touch with our writing and other things as well. But in terms of the writing, I've dared to do. And I just didn't know I had these stories in me. And between the feedback and my time constraint, I would get up in the morning. What worked for me was sitting down at 9 o'clock, having had some little breakfast and definitely coffee, and taking the word and doing pen to paper. I typically, prior to this experience, would sit down at my computer, my keyboard, and go boom, 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 boom. Something very intimate and wonderful happened when I went pen to paper, pen to paper. So every morning I would do a rough draft. I knew that I had a time constraint in terms of submitting, but I allowed myself X amount of time to do my first draft, and that was always pen to paper. And then I would take a breather. This all was sort of naturally, sort of organically happening. And then I'd come back to the proverbial drawing board, and then I would look at my work, and then I would maybe make a few corrections. And there was always a word count. And I love the variety of the word count because it was inspiring. I was particularly challenged with the little bitties, and that's how I came to trust myself that I could write a 50-word story, or believe it or not, a 6-word story. And then there were many other people doing the exact same thing wherever they did their writing. And it was exciting. I get excited just thinking about that experience. And then I would type, and then I would do the spell check business, and then I'd keep my fingers crossed and send it.
Wonderful. Yeah. It's amazing what a big difference the feedback on your writing makes. It was something I was so worried about when I started the challenge. And I know when you asked me if I don't want to read yet. And then like 2 days later, you were like, okay, I'm going to read. And it's just, I think once you see how kind and how generous the writers are, it really makes such a big difference. So I'm really glad you got your toes wet. Do you enjoy the process of writing? Does it energize you? Does it drain you? Do you find it hard? Do you find it easy? What is the process like for you?
I don't want to jinx my wonderful experience thus far. I think I started writing. I made a commitment to myself in 2010 that I would write a little something every day, and it was really basically what I was seeing. An impression of a moose in the middle of the road, literally stopping traffic, um, birds flying, the nature around me here in northwestern Montana. I really realized probably around 2010, 2011 that I was just surrounded by stories, creative nonfiction. I was beginning to dabble in some, and then I thought to myself, we all have stories, and I have a life full of stories. And so I decided to sit down and see what I could come up with. And I never felt stuck. One of the things that, and I don't know why that is. Maybe because I was just so fully ready to commit, even if it didn't please me. There was something comforting and reassuring about doing it as a practice, having it become a practice. I wasn't looking to be brilliant from the very beginning and right till this very moment. That we all have a story to tell, and it doesn't have to be brilliant. What I want and am aiming for is a good story. And so the dancer in me and the teacher in me and the kid in me is willing to put in the time, is willing to put in the work. And I can give myself short segments and say, I'm going to write for 10 minutes, or I'm going to write for 7 minutes, or, oh my gosh, I just completely forgot how, when I sat down and it's 2 hours later and I need to have some lunch because my stomach is growling. And it excites me. It excites me that Bob was my greatest champion and advocate to write. He said, no matter what any naysayer says, keep writing. So I carry that with me. And it's what I do now. I mean, I do other things too. My grandchildren are growing up. They're having own lives. My son is somewhere between Italy and New York City. And but this is what I do. I go to ballet on Tuesdays, flamenco on Saturday, and I write I love the schedule because it gives me a framework, and I do well with a framework. It frees me.
Mhm.
So in a way, um, I was talking to a friend recently who's not a writer, but who has enjoyed my stories, and I send her things that haven't been published. And she's a champion of mine too, which is lovely to have. Um, is that it it is who I am today. I mean, I think of myself, I'm not looking, I've toyed with the idea of a website, but that isn't it. I am challenged by um, the world today, and I try to bring it back to what I can do. And I have created an environment which is inspires me. I look out the window and I see a flicker and a flash of orange, and I want to write about it. So um, I find it very energizing, and it makes me feel like I'm uh, doing something. I'm contributing. My youngest granddaughter said, "Oh, Deb, they call me Deb, because my oldest kayak couldn't say Grandma Deb, and it came out Deb, and that's what my girls call me. Um, you're so talented." I sent her something that was accepted in August, and it's called Climbers. And my friends thought it was going to be about climbing mountains, and it's not about that at all. It's about roses and a child named Lily, and the family gardener named Fletcher. So who knew I had that in me? 30 minutes later, we were doing a marathon thing. I could go on and on about writing. It just fulfills me today. Yeah, very much.
Awesome. Now, tell me a little bit about going from the story on the page to getting it published. What route do you follow? What do you do? How do you choose your magazines?
Um, that takes perseverance with a capital P. And it's also time consuming for me. Um, and I early on was given some suggestions. I have a friend who only sends work to A-list places, and um, I've done things. Uh, I've gone on the web, I've gone on the internet to see about, because my stuff has been so short, looking for 1,000 words or less. A lot of people publish a great deal more. And so I got some help early on, and then I realized what I really needed to do was to trust my own editing. And that I also realized that in forming myself, part of my writing process is trying to figure out what's still there. And I would suggest that um, anyone really take the time, if they're submitting, to check the guidelines and to check the masthead, because there are changes that go on in life, and there are many changes in the field of publishing. And then there are deadlines and requirements. And more people are writing and submitting these days. So over time, my first published piece was in August of 2015, and it was based on a news event of a ferry in South Korea. And I was so excited by that. And so I published a couple of other things as a result of that. My first print publication was in 2016 in Common Ground Review, and it was about my oldest grandchild and her challenge when she was first born. Um, and then I hit a peak, or I didn't hit a peak. um, there was this hiatus. It was as though I kept writing and I kept sending out. And I developed a little introduction, and then please, will you consider publishing this? And I'm making simultaneous submissions, and then a little brief bio. I didn't have much of a bio at first, so I was talking a little about me. And then I went through a period where I was still writing and submitting, but I didn't get accepted by anybody. And then I tried to broaden and learn and educate myself about other possibilities. And then I took an online workshop that was very helpful. Um, and but I continued to write. I didn't feel sorry for myself. This was like, it's so curious because it's like, uh, some people think writing is very isolating and you are by yourself. Um, but it can be a very rich time. And I just kept at it. And I was in a couple of writer workshops here in Missoula. I took myself on a very expensive, my life changed writing wise in 2019 when I went to the Fine Arts Workshop in Provincetown, Massachusetts, on the tip of the Cape. And even though I'd spent summers on the Cape as a kid, I'd never gotten myself to Provincetown, which I think is curious. And my writing was raised. The bar was raised for Deb Trowbridge because a wonderful, extraordinary teacher named Marcy Hirschman and 6 other women, we all happen to be females, gathered together in a room for a week. And we were clicking, and I thought, oh my God, I have a seat at the table. I was surrounded by gifted writers. One person in this group had just won the short story award, the Alice Munro Short Story Award in Canada. She'd just gotten, I mean, it was just thrilling. And we were all so supportive. And we are since going on our writerly and living our lives. But that was an amazing point in time because I came working on a project and I left feeling that it meant so much. I felt like a real writer, even though I'd felt like a writer prior to that. Somehow being surrounded by other talented people. I didn't think of myself as had I earned it, had I earned my place at the table. It was just a remarkable experience. And we met on a regular basis, Zooming, of course. And here I am with my name on the back of a book. It was like Sherry in Ireland said, "Oh, Deb, your name's on the back of a book." And I never aimed for that, but it has happened. So I have my fingers crossed on things that I have out in the world now. And it was wonderfully helpful. I can't thank my friend Sherry enough for introducing me to Mia Botha and challenges and opportunities and things that can be financed and things that come gratis and investing in me. That's what I'm doing with my writing. And I loved that my youngest granddaughter, Tamar, said, "Oh, Deb, you're so talented." I mean, I was like, oh, she's 15 and she's going to be a little actress, but this enriches my life, the writing.
Wonderful. My next question. What would you consider to be literary or publishing success? So you've had a few things out in the world and you're still going, but when would you consider yourself to be successful? What is a successful writer to you?
Well, it's a little more complicated. I wish I could just give you a simple answer. I think with everything I've written has been not like Hansel and Gretel and the breadcrumbs, but they're stepping stones. Each little piece, I mean, I suddenly was writing a prose poem and hadn't realized that when I started. I'm a visual learner. I always have been, and so ekphrastic things appeal to me. I wasn't even sure what that word was until I had to look it up, but it inspires me to allow something to happen in my head creatively, where I can explore a reflection in a painting, or I'm half in one room and half in another. It just allows something wonderfully creative, and so I put it down. I write it down. I have my table. I tend to work in my because the natural light here is so beautiful, at my kitchen table. That's where I do my best work. And since Bob is here in his own fashion, but not across from the table, I get to keep my piles and my mess and my box of Kleenex. So, but what I'd really love, I'd love to be remembered for my writing. I don't think realistically and that will happen, but that it's this journey that I'm on. So my girls have a copy of this story of Kaya's beginning and how uncertain that was. And a couple of them have read the other book from American writers. I have high expectations for myself, but it's not about would I love to be in a local bookstore? We have a couple of independent bookstores here. Yes, because they put up the local author's name and the blurb, and then they have the books on the shelves. I think maybe having several books on a shelf would be thrilling, but I'm thrilled with what I'm doing right now, and that I feel successful in my own way as a writer right now. I don't need to keep pursuing the A-list because they pay so well. It's just not who I am. So I'll take my my successes like little petite fours, small chunks of lovely things if it comes along, and I'm willing to do the work. And I think willingness is really important, and that is that's being successful, keeping at it, persevering.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I like that. What do you like reading?
Well, I'm a huge fan of Hilary Mantel, and I had put off and put off and put off for some reason the trilogy that she wrote about Wolf Hall, and I picked it up the fall that Bob died, and I was just thoroughly engrossed. I love period pieces in films. I was once upon a time, and it's not that I'm not a fan anymore, but Jane Austen just amazing, drew me right in. Hilary Mantel with Wolf Hall drew me right in, and I loved how she mixed up. She identified everyone who was a real person once upon a time in the 1500s, and those that she added to create the story. And so I went from that to the next, and then I was in the challenge, and we had prompts that I went, and out came stuff that you're going to be reading when I submit my next short story, because what I've done is I've taken how I was inspired by her to write my own little stories and then weave them together, because and it's still not where I want it to be, but it's okay. It's going to be good enough and meet the 1200 exactly word count for Wednesday. And that's very significant. I realized, oh my goodness, I'm looking at the word exactly. She wants exactly 1200. So there's a discipline in that. I'm not going to be over 1 or under 3. It's going to be just, but I think it's going to take longer. You asked me about who I'm reading. Penelope Fitzgerald. I love Penelope Fitzgerald. And it turns out that both Hilary Mantel, both of these wonderful writers are no longer breathing, but they breathe through their work. And so I read about Italy with Penelope Fitzgerald's Innocence, and it took me right there. That's what a good writer does. They engage me, they transport me. And then I went on to read I Couldn't Wait at the Beginning of Spring, and I was in Russia, in Moscow, before the revolution. And they're page turners for me. Then I ordered up Lauren Groff's new book, The Vaster Wilds, and I was so taken with her years ago with her Fates and Furies, I couldn't put it down. However, I tried to read The Matrix, and so I ordered up her current book, and I just read a review, and I'm going to look up the reviewer because she has a new book out, and the way she handled the review was inspiring and very diplomatic. And the writer I've become and the reader that I've become, the more I read, I think the better I write. And somehow it informs me, the more I read, it informs my self-editing skills. And that's extremely helpful because those are tools that I take with me wherever I go. But getting back to Lauren Groff's book, I've got it over here. I was reading it this morning and I had to put it down. And it's like there are sections that are breathtaking, but the overall bigger picture, from this reader's point of view, not my cup of tea. But I'm going to pursue it. It's okay because I can learn from that too. She has some breathtaking scenes, and to me, that's absolutely worth reading.
Totally. Okay. My very last question, and the most important: what was your favorite book as a child?
Oh, boy. Well, because two, but absolutely, it was Charlotte's Web. But prior to that, and it still informs me today, are all of Beatrice Potter's little books. I take them out at Christmas and I read them. I used to take them out and read them to Bob, who didn't even know who Beatrice Potter was, which was fine. But they have inspired me, those books. They've stayed with me. I treasure them. I have my very first, my one and only copy of Charlotte's Web.
Beautiful.
With my side, just in case anybody glommed it and went off with it. They know it belonged to Deborah Trowbridge.
And then just before we sign off, do you have any advice for the writers, someone who wants to write more, submit flash, whatever you can, any advice you can give?
Not to give up, to allow a little bit of time, maybe even every day, particularly if you're busy, all the more reason to carve out 10 minutes, sit down with a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, or maybe you don't require a beverage. I like a hot beverage. And it's amazing what can happen in 10 minutes. And you can keep it close to your heart, or you can share it with a child or your spouse or a significant other, and they can accumulate over time, but it becomes something that I look forward to, and you get better at it, and you can enjoy it and be brave with it. I'm learning how to take greater risks and be braver. So just perseverance, keeping at it. Keep writing. That's what writers do. Be right.
Oh, thank you, Deb. I'm so proud of you. You've done such a great job. I'm so glad your stories are out in the world. We'll have all the links in your article, so everyone who wants to go read them can go. And thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Mia, so do I you. Thank you very, very much.
Okay.